So in this demo here, I thought I would show you guys how to how to work, first of all, how to work with curves. Um, we've talked a little bit so far about working with polygons and things, and today I want to go over some basics of like working with curves and surfaces, and then I want to go into how to get like a sort of a logo from 2D, and we're going to do a 3D animation, and we're going to make a little video of it and export it out. So I'm going to go through all that process here. So to start out with here, I've mostly been talking about polygons, and I'm not going to go over all that now. But the polygons are basically these sorts of shapes here, where you have polygons or faces here, and they're based on little points and edges and vertices and so on. And that's just how this 3D object gets made. Now, you'll notice here that you have a different section here under the, a whole different shelf here that has these things here, and these are called right here. These are called curves, and this is a sort of a different way of making 3D objects here. So just to start out here, I'm going to show you guys this tool here. This is the EP curve tool here. And what this does here, okay, so I've been playing around with this for something else, so let me just reset it to the way that you guys probably have it here. So let me hit this little hammer. Anytime you see this little hammer here, this is how you can adjust the tools that you have, the specifics here. So for example here, this is the way you're going to typically get it. It says 3 cubic curve degrees here. So what you're going to see when you try to use this curve tool here by default here is that it's going to give you something like this here. So I'm going to draw a little curve here, a little point here, just drop a little point, and if I click here, you'll see it automatically curves to adjust that curve to this. And this is basically like, maybe if you guys have worked with, say, like Illustrator or something, this is, or even Photoshop, this is like the equivalent of like a path. It doesn't mean that there's necessarily anything there. It's just something that I can use to make something else here. So, just like in Illustrator, you might want to give this, like, if you gave it a fill or something, you would see this sort of filling up, and you could give it a stroke and make it, whatever. In here, in Maya, I'm going to make a shape out of this. So the first thing here, I'm going to take this curve, and I'm going to duplicate it. So I'll press Control or Command D. And I'm going to move this up here so we can see it. In fact, let's make another one here. So I'm going to press Control D again, or Command D if you're on a Mac. And let's pinch this down here. And let's try this here. So I'm going to make a curve. I'm sorry, this is a curve. These are also, just so you know, these are what you call Nurbs curves here. That's just sort of something that's standard in 3D. Pretty much most 3D packages have this here. And what you're going to use these for, you'll see in just a second here, but they make sort of like more, instead of being based on the faces and the polygons, they're based more on like the connections between these different curves here. So if I have this, for example, here, I'm just going to use what you call a loft here, and that's this this section here, this little icon here, and that creates a connection between these two curves. So if I press this, you'll see it gives me that way of making a shape, right? And if I do another one from here to here, then I now have two lofted surfaces, and you can see in my outliner here, there's that one, and then there's my original one here, and that's the way I make a shape. Now what's interesting about this here is, like, if I take that that curve here, for example, I could even animate this if I wanted to and make a sort of a little animation here if I want. Another thing I could do here, I'm going to right click on this curve here, and this is going to expose the components of my curve here. So for example, let's say I wanted to change the shape of that curve. I could go here to Control Vertex here, and I can move that around, and I can get a sort of a different shape here. So we can use that way of modeling. Let me show you something else here. Let's delete both these surfaces here. And this time, instead of doing 1 to 1 here, I'm going to take this whole thing, and I'm going to select it in this order. I take this one, then I'm going to shift select that one, and then finally this one here. Now let's make one whole surface out of that. So I'll press the loft here, and I get this sort of um, this smoother look to it here. And I can, I can animate that if I, well, I can move it to modify the shape, or I could even animate it, or whatever you want here. But that's kind of how I would make a surface that way. I believe in a previous class, I've shown you guys some ways of doing a different command called a revolve here, and that we made a little wine cup. I'll just go ahead and do it again. But here, I think I'd best draw it here in the side view because it's just more, well, it's just better. And instead of using the EP curve tool, I actually like this thing a little more here. This is the Bezier curve tool. And so if you're familiar with something like Illustrator or any of Adobe's tools where you have those little points where you can modify them, this is going to feel maybe a little bit more familiar to you. I like it because you have a little bit more control. So let's say I'm drawing a wine glass here, for example. I'm going to make this thing bigger. I'm going to tap spacebar here, and that makes this window, or this what you call the viewport here, it makes it bigger. One trick I like to do when drawing like precise objects here, I'm going to hit the X key, and you can see this little thing comes on here, and that snaps to the grid here. So now that we're on the side view, I can just draw a little point right here. Let's go right here, and this is the base of my cup. I'm going to just, and this is just me clicking to these little points with this Bezier curve tool, right? And so far I've got a straight line. I'm continuing. You see my little blue point. I'm still drawing here. So I'm going to click here, and instead of letting go of the mouse button, I'm just going to pull this out here, and you can see now I've got this this curve, this nice curve to it here. So I'm going to leave it here, and then over here I'm going to make the stem of this cup going up like this. So I'll press the button again, and by default it just kind of does that. And if I were to stretch this out, I could modify that curve. I like this like this. Maybe I'll even tilt it in a little bit here. At this point, maybe I guess, yeah, I was thinking of doing a straight line, but I think I'll just sort of give it a curve and make it sort of do this sort of thing as it gets bigger towards the what do you call it, the container of the cup. So maybe, you know what, just to keep things even here, I'm going to press X again. Let's put it right here. I'm going to press X, and that's going to snap my little point to that curve, or to this part of the grid here. And I can change this back at any point here. So I'm going to let go of X, right? And you can see, well, I guess it's still snapped here, but I'm going to just, and again, I'm going to fix this later. So I'm going to pull this this little projection out this way here, and that gets me that nice curve. And now I'm no longer snapped because I let go of X, and I'm going to just continue drawing this little wine cup here, like this. You know what? I don't like that, so I made a mistake, and I'm just quickly going to press the backspace button on my keyboard, and that goes back here. Yeah, I don't like any of that, but let's just do this. I'm going to put a little curve right there. Yeah, the problem here is this projection. I'm going to go back and fix that later, but let's just continue drawing here. I'm going to make a little thing here, and this is just for me to show you guys how this is going to work. So right there, I kind of have the base of at least the outside of my cup. I want this hollowed in, so I've just clicked and I have not dragged the points out here. I'm going to build the inside of the cup, so I'm going to just drag this to the bottom here, stretch that out a little bit to give it a nice curve, and then maybe over here, there we go. Let's take that, and then finally, I'm going to hold down the X key and just snap that right over there. Okay, so at this point here, I'm kind of done with the base of the cup. I don't want any sort of little pointed thing inside, because if you think about this is if you think about this here, then I've got this little part sticking out. I want this part to be flat, so I've got to arrange that here. And like I said, we can still alter those things here. So I'm going to just get out of this this tool here, and I can do that by selecting any one of these tools, or just clicking any one of the shortcuts on your menu, such as Q, W, E, or R. Those are pretty much like your transform tools. So for example, W gets you the move tool. That's really, really handy. And here you see I've just drawn my Bezier, right? What the Bezier is about is, like I said, it gives you these little handles here. So this time, if you remember here when I drew the EP curve tool here, I had these things here, and if I right click on this, I get the control vertex, curve points and stuff like that. I don't remember if we went through this yet. But control vertex here gives me this thing, which is really useful, and I can change the profile of that curve. Where it's like the curve point here, I can just drop a little curve, a little point in here, and let's say if you want to add to it here, I could come up here to this section here of the shelf, and there's this little command here called insert knot. You can see the name of these things here on the command line here, but insert knot is here, and just so you know, this is the modeling mode here, and I have a whole section dedicated to curves here, and you can find pretty much anything you want right here, including you know, some of those things that I was talking about, as well as the surfaces here. This makes the things that I'm going to make in a second here. But that's where these commands are, or you have a ton of things here that are really handy on your shelf, and this is usually where I go to. So, okay, so yeah, so this is the control vertex here. Oh, I see. Yeah, so here on the curve point here, I was going to put another little point here because I don't have one, and I want to add a little bit more detail to that curve. So for example, here, if I were to insert a knot, that gets that. And so now if I go back to control vertex here, yeah, there we are, and I can move that in here. See, there it is here. That's a second one. Oh, I got the wrong one. Yeah, well, anyway, so I added a little knot there, and I could add a little bit more detail here. What I could even do too, if you want, let's say we have something here where I want to cut that out here. I could just take this and just use this little knife tool, and now I've got one curve and two curves here. So I want to keep it sort of simple here, but I'll show you some really handy things that we can do with this later. Let me just delete this out of the picture here. This is just a curve tool here. I'm just going to delete this, and you can see because I drew this here, but by default Maya tends to put things in the world center. So just so you know, if you wanted to do something with it, depending on what you're doing, you might want to move the pivot to that section here. We'll talk more about that later. So in here, I've got this Bezier curve, and I want to access the Beziers. That means the little handles for the points here. So I'm going to press right-click, and I'm going to access the control vertices. And here, I'm able to see the little Bezier handle. So if I zoom in here, you see this one, I like this, but I just don't like it sticking up that much here. So, if I take this guy here, I'm going to try to pull this little point around here. There we go. So I've selected that, and I just want to, do that. Actually, I don't really mind that actually, but I want to show you something here. So if I take this, let's say I just wanted to modify just this thing here. So what I can do here is I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to right-click, and let's go to Bezier Corner. And what that gives me here is this. And this is probably going to feel, this is what I'm talking about, that it's going to feel a little familiar here. So now I've kind of broken that curve into these two sections here, and I can sort of further like reshape this according to the profile that I want here. I'm going to do the same with, well, let's do this. I'm going to press Shift, right-click, and we did the Bezier corner. This time I'm just going to do Bezier. Because right now well, that's not a corner because it's got a curve right here. But if I were to do a Bezier, here's what you're going to get. You're going to get this little extension here, and that gives you that. And so, yeah, so I need to fix this guy here. And I'm going to take this and right-click here, and let's make that a Bezier corner. Yeah, there you go. See, and that's kind of flat. So what I could even do here is just take this, and then maybe just take that, and that's more like the shape I was looking for here. And I can just adjust that here, just to keep it nice. I'm going to modify this here. Let's take that little point here. Again, I'm holding down Shift, right-click, and Bezier corner. And now I can pull this this shape here more into that here. There we are. And so got this object here, and we're ready to make the the wine glass here, for example. So if I take this, let's go into 3D here, to my perspective view here, and you see I've basically drawn the profile of this line. I can come up here to where it says, well, I've got this little picture of a wine cup kind of, and this is the Revolve command. You can also find it here, just like I was saying earlier. You can also find that command as well as lots of others here under here. So Revolve, and if you click on the little box here, you'll see some different things, like for example the axis that it spins on here. In my case here, by default, it's spinning on the y-axis here. So, and I know that's the Y here because I can see the little drawing here. And eventually you'll learn to recognize this stuff by the colors and stuff. But that's the main idea here. I've got the start sweep and the end sweep. That means like where I want to start and where I want to end on. So this is making a complete circle. Anyway, those default settings are fine. I'm just going to press this, and there is my wine glass, like so, So what if, I mean, this is fine. Let's say I wanted to change some things here. So I'm going to go back to, let's go to the Bezier curve, and of course I can change the profile of that stuff here if I wanted to. But what if for some reason, I don't know, for some reason we wanted some asymmetry on this thing. So I want to point out here that I have two ways of, well, these are two different things. I have the Bezier, and then I have the revolved surface that it generates here. So once I have the surface here, I can actually access these other things here. These are the control vertices here, and I can access this and change that. Now, one thing you may be seeing here, it's a little lopsided and stuff because that's just sort of the way that this surface is being generated here. I can generate another surface here by modifying this sort of object. So right now you can see I've got a Nurbs surface here. So you see the revolved surface there. From this, I'm going to go to Modify. The Modify menu. You might remember that's where we freeze transformations and do some different things here. I'm going to go to this thing here that says Convert, way down here at the bottom. And here I have this thing that says Convert Nurbs to Polygons. Yes, that sounds very much like what I want. So I'm going to convert this surface to polygons, and I can do some further editing with it, like with traditional polygon tools. But let's not press that yet, because this one is one of those commands that I really want to get into the specifics here of what I'm doing. So I'm going to press this little square, and that brings up these options here, which are actually very, very useful here. So I was fooling around with this earlier, and it's set to general. What I do want to point out here, let's just go ahead and do this here. By default, I think it's usually set to standard fit. And what you're going to get here, and I think it's also set to triangles here. So if I do this, if I press apply, then I get this thing here, and you see it makes me triangles. And sure, I mean, we could work with that. It made something, and I can adjust the settings here to adjust the detail here. What I like using here, I like using quads, and I think in some of the other lectures I've talked about here, quads are nice because there's so many advantages to using them when you're working with polygons. We can talk about that later here, but quads is kind of what I want. Also, if I want, if you want to just say, oh, okay, you know what, give me something as detailed as this, and so I want no more than 200 polygons on this, and I'll press apply. It's made me, actually that's not all that bad. It's just a little simple maybe, but maybe I can choose something a little different here. So I'm going to go with I'm going to delete that. I'm going to choose let's choose the general here. I like this one here because this one you can choose like how detailed you want it on each thing here. So for example here, I've got 20, you're going to have to play around with these to see which direction is which here. But let's say for here, if I apply this, let's see what that gives me here. It's going to give me something, yeah, that's just too little. Let's increase this here. So I've got 9 divisions on one side and 20 on the other. So if I do this, yeah, I'm going to just increase that. Let's bump this up to, say, 50, right? Let's see what this gives me here. Okay, yeah, so that gave me a lot of divisions on this side, but only 9 sides here around here. So let's bump that up here, maybe to this much here. And what I do want to point out here is, uh, you know, just like vector drawings here, this curve is sort of an abstract shape. Let's say it's not like the definitive thing. The curve is it's just creating like a profile, and from that I can create the shapes here with something like this, or if you fiddle around with the settings there for your NURB surface, you can get it to be more resolution. The point is the NURBS curve is like a definition here for the surface here. So yeah, that's a way to create the surfaces here. What I want to show you next here is, well, what if, you know, and this is kind of the example that I want to show you. Well, what if we have a little logo here that I want to bring into 3D and I want to make into an animation. So let's say, you know, I actually get like a company logo or something here, and I'm going to make a little animation for it here. So I've got this little angry hamburger guy here, and sketch this up really quick in Illustrator. Here we are in Illustrator, and I have this this little guy that that I built. It's just sort of a little mock-up logo, and you know, it's just basically this shape here. And just so you can see what's going on here, you know, it's just one layer, a bunch of little objects here. Yeah, it's pretty simple. Let's just say, just to show you something here, let's say this actually had something here that we might want to use. So I'm going to say, I'm going to type something in here. Let's call it, I know, burger thing. There we go. And let's say this is the name. Let's pick a different font. You know what? I'm just going to go simple here. Let's go with, let's say the impact font. Whatever. You know, I could actually design this, and we can do it some different ways, including like maybe we want this 2D and stuff. Let's go in here and let's align it. So I'm going to go to paragraph. I'm going to align it to the center. We can do that. You know what? Just to give it some interest here, I'm going to go into character, and let's start spinning this around a little more, just to give it some sort of interest here. Well, that wasn't correct here, but I don't mind that. Let's spin it the other way, this one here. Let's take this guy, and I'm going to play around with, you know, with the line height here. So take that and maybe just alter that. Let's make this go the other way. Excuse me. Sure. You know, this is kind of interesting enough for what we're doing here. So we've got this this little font here. I'm going to take this thing here, and I'm going to make this a logo. Now, I'm going to make this a drawing here. So we're not done yet. Okay. So this is a vector, you know, but this is still a font. And if I wanted to go in here and type in something else, you know, I still can. You know, I still can, and so that's, you know, that's editable text here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have to convert this here. This is very important because Maya will not accept this sort of stuff. You know, it needs to be vectors here. So Maya is not a vector program, just as Illustrator isn't a 3D program. So I need to convert it into the bare basics sort of format here. And one way that we could see, you know, the actual vectors in Illustrator here is you can go over here to view, and you can see outline here, and this shows me here I do have a vector shape, and then, you know, this thing is colored black here. This is just a well, this is just text here. So I'm going to go back to my my regular view, the GPU view, and that gives me this. So what I need to do here is I have to go into Object, and I'm going to come over here to this this command here called expand. And what expand does in Illustrator is it converts it converts your vector, I'm sorry, it converts your things, say a font, or maybe you actually have like there's a ton of things that you know, for expand appearance, that's another useful command. Let's say you have an outline. What it can do is it can separate the fill from the outline, and you get like two shapes, so maybe like a shape for the outline and a shape for the fill. You can break things apart by using these expand commands. So I'm going to go over here to expand and just, yeah, there you go. See, it's asking me, well, what do you want? I want the object and the fill. In my case, I have no outline here, and that's why it's grayed out here. And I can just press OK, and there you are. So now, if I go here to the outline mode, you can see the command for that is Control Y. You know, it gives me sort of this little X-ray view of the graphic here. So yeah, that's ready to go, and I am going to position this maybe around here. And I'll tell you what here, just so you guys see, it's a little funny here, but Maya is going to use this corner of my document here as the origin here. So I'm going to place this maybe somewhere around there. We can make it a little bigger if we want. And I'm going to go to File, I'm going to Save As, and let's put this here, let's call this burger thing 2, because I was working earlier with this here, so I'll do this. And okay, now that brings up this thing, and this is really important, this little menu here. So by default, Illustrator is offering me like the latest, greatest version that it knows about here. And like I said, Maya doesn't know or care about any of that stuff. All it wants to see is a vector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it down to, say, Illustrator 8. I think Illustrator 3 will work as well. I don't know about any of the other ones, but I think Illustrator 8 is a safe bet. And I can press, I can just select that option there. And you see, it's given me this little thing here. I don't care about that because it's nothing, nothing, you know, important for what I'm doing here. So it's just a very basic format here. I'm going to press OK, and it's going to save it out as an Illustrator 8 file, which is what Maya can read. So I'm going to press OK. And you know what? Let's go in here, back into Maya, and I'm going to go to File. And okay, so the first way that I can do this here is I can go and I can import this in, and I can just import in my my Illustrator file. If I could find out where I put it. Oh yeah. Let's see. What I could probably do here is, let me just find out here. Save as, and where did I put it? Oh, export test, of course. Okay, so in here, I'm going to go to File, Import, and let's just go in here for a second here. And pull that up, and sure enough, here we are. Yeah, there we are. So that's the vector that I just created. I'm going to press Import, and yeah, and that brings up this, and you can see all these things here as vectors and stuff. So yeah, I can make all this stuff here be, you know, if I wanted to, I could start creating my thing that way here, but I've got a better way of doing this here. I'm going to just skip this here for a second here, and I'm going to cut to the chase here with this this command here, because you can actually create things based on an Illustrator object. And this, well, let me show you something here. Let's go back a step. So for example here with this little this little patty thing here, there's this command here that gives me the bevel plus. If I press this, it gets me, well, it gives me a solid shape with sort of a cap on it here, and I'm going to access the input for that by going here to the channel box, and you can see here bevel plus. That's the thing I'm looking for, and I've got a width here for the extrusion. You know, that's pretty much determining like how big I want that. It goes to 4, but I can make it whatever I want here. You know, you can make it be whatever you want, and in here I could even just choose like, oh, okay, I want this to be a little bigger. You know, I want it to taper down a little bit. So you get to choose here, you know, how you want this here. So there's some different options that you can play with here. So okay, I'm going to delete that surface here, and let's start from scratch here. This time I'm just going to go and instead of bringing in my Illustrator file like that, I'm going to go to Create, and I'm going to go to Illustrator Object. Let's click this little guy here, and this gives me all those options that I was just playing with here, in this menu like before I create it. I'm going to go ahead and create it. I mean, I can fiddle around with this after creating it. I'm going to go and create this here, and let's pull up my little logo here, Burger Thing 2, and that creates this guy here. So let's do this. I'm going to take Bevel Plus, and let's make that a little bigger here. Let's give that a depth of 6. Sure, that's fine. This is fun. This is cool. So we could do that. If I wanted, a different thing too, what I could do is maybe just create this out of different, different objects. I could separate the name from this and get a different effect here. We'll be fine with this. What I'm going to do here, this has converted this to a polygonal object. So I'm going to go ahead and separate this out. Separate is like the opposite of combine when you take multiple objects and combine it into one. Separate is going to just break them all apart. And so now under this little folder here I have all these different things here, and this is actually going to be kind of useful for me here. So let's do this. The very first thing I want to do here is going to take all this stuff here and let's delete the history here. So all this stuff that you see here is going away, which is great, okay? Because once I'm happy with this, I don't want anything to happen to it. All this stuff here, anything I do here, anything that gets messed up, maybe if you're taking this to another computer, things do go wrong, and maybe these things get changed. So one way to protect that here is I'm going to go to here to delete by type, and I'm going to delete the history, and all that stuff goes away. So these are just objects as far as I see here, and nothing can really happen to them here. So I don't know that I'm really going to bother naming this. Let's do this. I'm going to take this stuff here, I'm going to group that together, and let's call that name. And then this stuff here, well, let's do some other things here to this. I want this part here to be part of the top jaw here. So I'm going to select all these little teeth here at the top. I'm going to select that little piece of the top bun here, and I'll press P for parent. Either that, or I can just drag this to, let's see, polysurface 2. Let's do this. I can, if I know the object here, I can just select those these objects. I'm going to click my middle mouse button and drag it into polysurface 2, like so, and that's the top bun. In here, the same thing here. I'm just going to grab this, and what is this? Okay, polysurface 16. And so, I could drag it in, or this time I think I'm just going to shift select the last one, and you can see it's colored green. So if I press P for parent, then I can, just do that. And so I'm left with like 3 things, and this is pretty simple for me to use here. I'm going to call this top bun. This one here, let's call that burger patty. And what else? And here, let's do bottom bun. and yeah, this is the name here. So let's get started doing some animation here. So the very first thing I want to show you here, before we talk about any rendering and things, is well, cameras. So the perspective camera, this is actually a camera, and I'm rotating around here to choose a perspective and stuff. One more thing before I forget. So like I said, my origin point here is based on the top corner of the paper. I'm going to do something different here. I'm going to alter that here, and I'm going to press D. And I'm just going to bring that down here. When you press D, you access the pivot point here, and I'm going to drag that over here to somewhere that makes a little more sense for me. I'm going to maybe put that in the center, and you know what? Let's snap that to the origin here, to world 0 position. So I'm going to hold down X, and you can see when I hold down X, that little guy comes on, that means I'm snapped, and I can just hit X, snap that over there. Is that, no, I can hold down X and just bring that back a step here, like so. I'm going to take this and let's modify this and just freeze the transformations here. When you freeze the transformations, that means like right now it looks like I've moved that about 22 units and stuff. When you freeze the transformations, I'm telling it, no, this is your default position. And if you enter 0, this is where things are going to start out. So this is good. I want to set up a little camera animation for this. And when I create, when I create something here, I want to probably storyboard this out here. I don't know if I have this on a different document here. I probably don't. I did this previously in a previous example here, but I want to sort of sketch out a little idea on paper or maybe Photoshop or something or whatever. I want to do some thinking about like what it is, how I want to show this little animation. I just find it easier to do my planning away from the computer than to just fiddle around with this thing here. So what I thought, I don't have that file handy to show you guys, but what I thought of the animation, how it's going to go, is I want the camera to start out like looking at nothing here. Maybe it's all white. I want this to zoom out, and we see this this burger here, and maybe it does this thing here. Yeah, see, so I've got this is another thing. Well, my plan was to have the jaws sort of moving around. So just looking at this now, that's not a position that I want to work with here. I want that pivot to be over here, because that means like if I wanted to rotate it, for example, then I'm going to rotate it based on that position and not this position here. So that tells me, again, if you just do some thinking before actually jumping into this here, you can figure out all sorts of problems here. So here, I got to fix these animations here. I'm sorry, these transforms, the pivots. So I'm going to press D, right? And let's get that to be right about over here. Let's take burger patty. I'm going to put that in the center here. And let's take the bottom bun, and I'm going to put that somewhere that makes a little bit more sense here. What I could even do, you guys, what I could even do for pivots, if you want to, sometimes this is really, really helpful. You know what? I find this really, really helpful, especially when you're animating like mechanical parts and things. You can snap to vertices. Let's say you wanted this at the exact pivot of that little thing there, at the center. So as it turns out, on this bottom bun here, I've got a little division right there, and if you look here, this is a vertex right here, isn't it? So what I can do is I can press V for vertex, and that snaps me to the vertex position here, and I can just, bring this over there, and that's pretty much, centered. That's kind of a cool idea. One last thing, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but another trick that's kind of interesting here. Let's go back to regular. Press D to get out of that mode here. Did I not do that? Right, okay. So yeah, so in here, another trick that I like a lot, let's do this. I'm going to take this edge here, for example, and let's take this, double clicking this, so it selects that whole loop. Is that right? Okay, yeah. And I'm going to convert this selection here to vertices, so I'll press Control, right click, and this is such a handy little menu here because you can convert. In this case, I've got I've got some loops here, and of course the loop is broken here because it's not connecting up to the other side. But I've got this loop here that I'm going to convert that selection to vertices. So I want to find out what vertices are in that here, and I can just go here, Control Vertices. I'm sorry, two vertices, and that gives me that that selection here. So now, one trick that I like doing a lot here, if I want that perfect center of exactly where that thing is here, I don't have that perfect center here, but I can see kind of like where the transform is suggesting, that's where it's going to be here. So I may have mentioned this in a previous example here, but you have these deformers here, and there's one that I like here called the cluster, and what this is used for is for controlling little groups of vertices here. So this created a cluster handle. And what it's really for is like you can fine-tune the little animation here. You can move those little vertices based on that little manipulator here, but I'm not going to use that for that. I'm going to take this, but now what this has given me here is it's given me a little handle that I can snap to. So this is a thing in the 3D world, and I can press D to select my pivot point, and I'm going to press V, and now I can just snap to that, and there you go. So that's my pivot, right? And that's exactly where I want to rotate this thing from, maybe. I don't need this guy anymore, the cluster handle, so I'm just going to delete that here. And we have our little center. Yeah, and so the last thing I need here is camera. And let me show you something. Let's go ahead and create a camera. That's going to be over here under rendering. You can create a camera this way. You see, by default, I have this kind of camera, which is a free camera. I'm going to be doing that today, but just to show you here, I'm going to go here to create cameras, and you have these different kinds of cameras here. I have camera and camera and aim, and then camera aim and up. This one gives you a little target here that you can revolve around. We'll get into that a little later, but I'm going to go with a free camera, which is pretty much the same thing as what I'm dealing with here. This is the perspective camera. The perspective camera is pretty much like a free camera, and it just gives you another camera. But the point is, you know, I've been working in 3D here, and I want to continue working with this, but I want like a dedicated camera that I'm just going to leave alone here for my shot. So to switch to this camera here, I can go to Panels, I can go to Camera 1, and do that. So now I'm in the camera, and I must be looking inside the object here. I can zoom out a little bit here, and this is, you know, it behaves pretty much just like the camera. But here's the thing: if I go back to Perspective here under Panels, Perspective, let's turn around here, and you can see that's my camera in like world space. So this thing is really, really useful for me here. And I'm going to set up a little camera animation here. So let's say, you know, I'm going to look at my storyboard here, and I'm going to try to figure out like, well, how do I want to start this here? So I said I wanted to start from the inside here. So I'm going to jump into my camera here. I'm going to pan the camera right about here, and I said, you know, we wanted to start at the white here. Let's do this. I'm going to press, I've got that camera selected here, right? Another way I can select the camera here is if you don't have that selected, I am looking through this here, and I'm going to select this camera by hitting this little icon here, like so, and then yeah, and that just selects that camera here. From here, I can animate it here. I do want to show you guys something here. So if I press S to set a keyframe here, that's setting my very first keyframe here, and then maybe, let's see, we are at 24 frames per second, which is like by default, that's the film, you know, the film frame rate here. I can change that for video if I want here. I'm going to go to this little orange man in the bottom right corner of your workspace, and I'm going to change this to you know, this 29.97 frames per second right here, either that or 30 frames. I'm going to do this. This is like video here. I'm going to do this, and let's go back here. Because I've changed the frame rate here, this has moved a little bit. So one trick that I'm going to do here is I'm going to select this. I'm going to hold down Shift, select that key there, and I know that's a little off, so let's do this. I'm going to move this back here to 0. Let's try that again right here. I'm going to hold down Shift and just click that, and I'm going to right click and say snap, right? And that should be, oh, of course, there we go. So I wasn't looking at it right here. So I'm going to take 0 and then just do that, and let's snap the key. That should probably go to frame 1. So if I snap the key, let's try that out now. Yeah, there you go. So now instead of 1.24, that's now on frame 1. And in fact, I'm going to move that back a little bit the same way I did when I was snapping it. I'm going to hold down Shift and click that key, and it becomes red. And now I can just move it wherever I want. If I click in the middle of that red, I'll just move it back to 0. Okay, so I'm pretty much ready to go to do my animation here. And my idea here is at about maybe a little less than a second here, say at frame 20. I'm going to move out so that we can start seeing this stuff here. Maybe I want to be at this position here, so I'll press S, and I have to have my camera selected here. So I'm going to press this just in case, and I'll press S to set the keyframe here, and let's see what that gives me here. So that gives me that. Now, one thing I do want to point out here, you know, maybe I drew my storyboards really nice, and I want the camera, you know, I'm thinking about like the photography and things, and I want the camera to frame this a certain way. Well, check this out here. So if I take this, right, if I take this window here and change it here, look at that. The aspect ratio is changed. So how do I really know what I'm getting here? You know, so easy way to do this. Well, first of all, in your render settings, I will have decided, you know, what the size of my media is here under presets. So under image size, this is where you would choose that here. In my case here, I've got a width of 960 by 540. I'm going to keep it like this for now. But that is where the size of my pictures that I'm going to be making from Maya, that's where that's coming from. And I'm going to come up here on my viewport. I just showed you guys this little icon to select the camera. Over to the right here, I have this little icon here, and if you hover over it here, way down here at the bottom, you're going to see the name. And I mentioned this because it's funny because you know, the Autodesk always changes the icons. Sometimes it gets a little confusing, but you know, that's what you're looking for, and it'll probably always look like this. But anyway, in here, this is basically sort of a little square with a hole in it, sort of, and this is called the resolution gate here. And if I press this here, now I get this, well, you know, just much like the little icon suggests, I get this mask around the stuff that's not really going to be in my shot. And this little square that's visible here, this is what I'm going to see. So now, you know, if I do that, I'm pretty confident that that's what I'm going to be seeing when I make this this render here. So, you know, so I can continue animating like this. And here's the cool thing here: when you have, you know, this is why I set up a camera here. At some point, I've animated this, so I'm going to leave it alone. But you know, the worst possible thing that you can do is just to have a camera, and then by accident, and this happens, you know. We're human and we make mistakes, and sometimes something slips up over here. So if your camera is not moving, what I would recommend that you do is just select all this stuff here, right? And just right click and lock the selection. And that makes it so that none of this stuff can be touched here. It won't move, right? Yeah, and you see in this case here, it's sort of it's been locked. So it's a little darker gray in here. This is animated, so it won't. I can't do anything more to this, but it won't really change that. Let's just undo that here. Another thing that I can do here, if you're just careful, you know, I've already animated it, so no matter what, there's something happening on these keys here, and that's not going to change, you know, unless I change it myself. But I can't, like, if I do this, you know, and then go back here, it doesn't care because at frame 20 there was a certain position and nothing has happened after that. Anyway, we can talk more about animation and stuff later. I'm just going to continue with this example here. Okay, so I've got about a second here. Maybe over here, let's frame 35, it's a little more than a second. And now, maybe we see this guy here. Let's play that just to get a feel for it here. So I'm going to press this. Oh, one important thing here, very important. I want to make sure I'm playing back at playback speed. I am playing back at the frame rate, right? So I think when you start Maya here, it should say play every frame, and if you do that, then it's going to look funny. You know, it's going to look, that's not the speed. You see how fast it's going here? That's just showing it as fast as Maya can possibly show me this, which may be useful in like simulations and different things like that. But in here, I'm going to go to the actual frame rate here, 29.97, which is this. And you see I've got these little things here, ×1, ×0.5, or ×2. And that reflects, oh, do you want it playing at half of the speed, the full speed, or twice the speed here? So I'm going to just save this here. So it's playing at full speed, at the regular speed here. And I'll press enter. I'm sorry, I'll press the play button. That is the speed that I'm actually working with here. So this is how fast it's going to move. And I kind of like that. I think, you know, I think that could work here. In here, let's continue moving back here. maybe something a little slighter here. So I'm going to go to frame 75 and just pull back here. So we start seeing this. At this point, I'm going to frame the selection here, like so. Again, camera 1. So I really want to make sure this fits in here. So yeah, you know what? At this point here, I want to see the whole burger. So I'm going to do that. I'll press S here. That's just the teeth. And here we get a little sort of a closer view of this. Yeah, and so maybe in here, let's start doing some tricks here. So I'm going to take this this top bun and the bottom bun, and I'm going to set a keyframe on that. Let's set a keyframe on here, and I'm going to have these this mouth open up at frame 40. So in here, I notice one more little thing that I like to do here. I'm treating this logo as if it were like a character. So you know, even though we're in a computer and we've got all these tools to work with here, I like to treat my animation as if it's like a flip book, and I want to think about my poses that are all on the same frame. Because I don't. The last thing I want to do here is like in here, say I have this and then a frame here. Here, I don't want to be saying like, oh, okay, on this frame here, I can see on frame 35, frame 40, it's going to be opening the mouth here. So I'll open that up and press S. But oh, okay, so that means on frame 40 here, I'm going to move this thing around here, but wait, look, it's at frame 41. So the last thing I want is to be digging around my timeline for all sorts of weird keys. No, I want that just set up, I just want that set up, and when I key something, I want to keep track of my keys. So I would like to, at least like to start off with the keys more in the same place here. So when I have something important here, that's why they call it keyframe. It's an important part of your your storytelling action here. I'm going to just keep this. Again, I'm going to try to keep this as if like I'm thinking about like a little flip book or something here. So in here, I'll have that set up here. Let's do this. Actually, I can just maybe just get rid of this. At this point here, I want this flipping around maybe about 180 degrees here. Let's do that. And you can see I was winging it kind of by moving it over here with a little rotation axis here. I could fine tune it here and actually make it 180 by entering that number in, right? And you can either right click and press key selection like that, or I can just click somewhere else, and I'm going to middle mouse button here just so I'm back on the viewport, and with this selected, the burger patty, I can press S, and that gets me one little flip like that. That's kind of getting there. Maybe in here, let's see what that gives me here. So I've got this little frame here. Just to make it interesting here, let's do this here. I'm going to give it a little tilt, and maybe a little something like that. You continuing on here, I might as well do just keep this sort of timed to the same thing. So in here, let's do that. There we go. And and again, maybe I could do a different animation here, or if I just want this this mouth to open the same way a couple times, what I could do is I could just hold down Shift, right? And I'm going to click. And this time, instead of letting go of the mouse button, I'm just going to drag across here, and I'm going to select that range of that animation here. And I'm going to press right click and copy that here. And remember, 35 is the same frame as 45. So I'm going to do this. From frame 45, I'm just going to paste that. So now I've got two mouths, or two opening where it's doing that sort of thing here, and I can, it's just sort of doing two mouth openings here. And from frame 45, it just closes, and immediately it starts opening again here. We can modify this here, maybe to do something a little different here this time. Let's take this guy and make it go this way. So on frame 50, there we go. See, it's a little different now. And maybe in here, on frame 50, let's just bring that back another way here. So that should be like 360. Okay, yeah, that's getting kind of interesting here. Yeah, you know, this pretty much shows my whole point of doing this. And I can continue going here with this. Oh yeah, so let me show you something here. So let's take this here, and you know how I copied this part here, and immediately, because in frame 45, it'll just get to that original position, and then it'll just immediately go back up to frame, you know, to this position here. So there's no like, there's no, uh, you know, there's no stop in it. It's just direct. Um, and of course, that's what it's supposed to do here. But what if we took this? I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to give it one more mouth opening here. This time, instead of putting this on frame 45, I'm going to put it, say, on, I'm sorry, frame 55. I'm going to move it forward a couple frames here to, say, 58 or so. I'm going to press paste, and just paste this in here. And this gives me what you call a hold, right? So if you look at this, I've got a couple just little frames there where this thing is holding still. And that, you know, that's interesting because it can give us some interest in our timing here, where it just, you know, it doesn't open up immediately, and maybe, you know, maybe it's something you want to use for your timing here. So, you know, just as important as when you land on certain poses or certain times, you want to think about how long you hold those poses for. In this case, this is just maybe a sort of a simple little animation. I'm not that concerned, but it might be interesting. Like if you're doing, say, a character animation or something here, you know, you want to think about like where, how long this stuff is holding for here. So I'm going to keep it here like this, and you know, if I wanted to, we could probably animate this thing. But you guys get the point of the animation here. So I think I'm going to pause this video and come back and show you guys how to render this. All right, so here I'm getting ready to render this here. So the very first thing that you want to do, and I can't believe I haven't done this yet, but I need to save that file. I'm going to go to File, Save As, and I'm going to put this somewhere I want to work with here. So I've got this little folder here that I'm doing my burger animation, and let's call this Burger Animation 2, right? Or 02, whatever. I'm going to save this out. Oh, quick note, I like to save my things out as MA, Maya ASCII, and the basic thing about that is it's just a more stable format than MB. MB is a bunch of ones and zeros, whereas like an MA file is it's done in this stuff here. So ever since I opened up Maya, there's this sort of stuff here that looks a little bit like gibberish, but you know, if you were to look into it here, you could probably understand this. Whereas if you were to look at an MB file, which is a bunch of ones and zeros, you're going to have a tougher time figuring that out. Anyway, I'm going to press and close this out. We can explain that later. Here, all right. So let's start with the. I'm going to set the project here. So I'm going to go to File, Set the Project, and what this is going to do here is this is going to put. It's going to associate my file to something here. Sorry, let's go back. So that's going to make that's going to associate the file to this folder, and that means like if I had textures or whatever, and if I make images, those images are going to be in this folder here. So rather than me looking around for wherever Maya puts the images in the default folder setting, I'm telling it, no, I'm working in this folder, and you just put my images here. So here, I've actually already created a project in this folder here, so it went ahead and created a little folder for images. But I'm going to set this up here. I'm going to say Set. And if you've never done this before, if you haven't set up a previous project in there, you would get this window saying, you know, I don't see anything there. Do you want me to create the default workspace? And in that case, I would just say create the default workspace, and it'll be fine. So here, now I've associated this file with that folder, and I'm ready to set up my render settings. And I'm going to go in here to these little things here at the top, and you see these little movie things. I've got this, what do you call this? It's sort of a little clapper. You know how the director yells action and he claps that thing. So that's the little icon that you're going to see over here. And you see some variations of it. I'm going to look at this one here that's got like a little gear next to the clapper. And if I click this here, you get the render settings here. And so here, I'm actually using the Arnold Renderer, right? If you don't have this here, you can go here to Windows, Settings, Preferences, go to Plugin Manager, and you just want to make sure that Arnold is loaded here. So if you scroll down, Arnold's got its own section. Arnold is a rendering system here, and you can just scroll all the way down here to where it says MTOA, MLL, and you can see here I have it both loaded and auto-loaded, because in my case I want to use Arnold, you know, mostly as my rendering system, so I don't want to have to do this all the time. So I'll click auto load so it always comes up here. So I'll press close now. It's set up. And you know, here, instead of my software or whatever, I'm going to choose the Arnold Renderer. And let's get ready to save this thing here. So first of all, I've got to give my little movie files a name. And I'm going to say burger logo animation, right? That's what I'm doing. Okay, so that's the name of my little movie here. The image format here, because I'm working with Arnold, it gives me this EXR format here. I could choose some different ones here, but I'm going to stick with that here. And then here, under frame and extension here, now this part is important because if I do not change this from single frame, when I render it, it's just going to give me one frame of animation, right? Just one frame, which isn't really an animation. It's just a picture. So in here, I'm going to open this part up here, and I'm going to select pretty much anything except something that's a single frame. And I would really recommend either this one or maybe this one here. This one's good too. But here, I like this one here because this is the way it's going to name something here. So you can see the name of my file here is Burger Logo Animation. And then here, I've got a little underscore separating out the frame number. And then here, it's going to choose the extension that I'm working with. In my case, that's the EXR. So it's going to say Burger Logo Animation underscore whatever frame I'm on plus EXR. And now that I've chosen that, now I have this other thing here that comes up. It says frame padding. And this is basically determining the digits of the number of the frame. So instead of saying frame 1, it's going to say frame 0001, right? And why that's important is because this is going to eliminate some work for me. So I can just take the very first frame of this film that I make and bring it into After Effects, and it's going to put everything together for me because it knows, oh, okay, so frame 002 comes after 001, you know, and that's instead of like, you know, sometimes you might have like frames 1 to 10, for example, and a certain program might recognize, you know, you have frame 1 and then immediately after that it puts frame 10 and then 2 and so on, because that's the way the computer understands it. So to get around that here, that's why we use the frame padding here, you know. Yeah, so that's that. Frame range, this is just asking me, well, how long do you want the animation to last? And in my case, I'm going to go from frame 0 to, let's call this frame 80. I'm going to go a little beyond what I have here, and that gives me some room to play around with things here. And frame 0 to 80, I'm going to press, or whatever, you know, if it's still, I can just duplicate this a couple times if I needed it, and that's frame 70. But I'm just going to keep it here. Let's give this a color here. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to right click and I'm going to assign a new material. Let's put something on here. I'll tell you what, for the time being, let's just put the blend here. I'm going to use just a default blend. I'm going to make it red. I'm going to click this and let's make that red. Oh, I forgot this guy. So do that. I'll press. This time I've got a material in the scene already, so rather than assigning a new material, I'm just going to go over here and grab that little material that I made here. Splin 1. Press that. Let's go in here. Yeah, that's red, sure. And I'm going to adjust some of the settings here so it's not as shiny. It's still going specular color. This is like how shiny it is. You see, and you can see on the little icon here, I can fiddle around with the settings to get it to look a little different. I'm going to just turn all these down because I don't want any reflection here, especially the reflectivity. That's going to make these things be like a little bit like a mirror. I mean, you can if you want. I don't want this on mine. But here, I'm going to just turn this down, and I'm ready to go. Yeah, so at this point here, I'm going to do a little test render, and the way I'm going to do that here, the way I'm going to do that here is I'm going to go to Arnold Render, and we're going to make a shot. We're going to make a little picture here with this, a little image, and Alright, so at this point I'm kind of ready to go here. I've got my little animation, I've got the materials on it. One thing that I'm missing though is the lighting. So one thing I think I'm going to do here, otherwise we won't be able to see it here, because like just to show you what I'm talking about here, if I go to Arnold, I'm going to use the render thing and not the, I mean I guess I could do that too, but I'm going to use it from Arnold, and if I render this out I'm only going to see black here. You see that? So I can't see anything in my scene. However, if I hit this little icon here, I can see that there's definitely something there. It's black because I can't see it because there's no lighting, and that means like this is the alpha. So if I were to send this to a program as with something with a transparency channel on it, I would see like a black version of this burger here. So I'm going to do that, and let's bring in some lighting here. So one thing that I like to do a lot of times for this example here, I'm going to go to lights, and I'm going to create a simple sky dome light, and this looks pretty good right off the bat. So this is like a sort of a studio setup here where you've just got a white light coming from all directions here. So if I go back here to Arnold, I'm going to go to render, and let's do that. And this is the image it makes me here. You can see I've got a white background and stuff, and okay, yeah. So that's not giving me a transparency, and I'll show you why in just a second here. So what I can do. Well, this is the sky dome light here. What I can do is, with that sky dome light selected, I can choose the color, the intensity of the light, and so on. I'm going to just scroll down here, and we have some settings for the visibility here. So I don't want this to be visible with the camera, so I'm going to just take this little slider down. I'm going to position it here at 0. Let's try that again. Now, here. Let's go back just to show you what I'm talking about here. This time I'm going to open up the Arnold Render view, which is actually down here. And that's what I started out with here. What I could do too is I could render out, just to show you an example here, I'm going to just draw a little square for comparison so I can show you the difference here. So I'm going to take that, and then I'm going to press, let's press that button. Let's press this little button here, and I'll render that out again. Oh, okay, of course. Yeah, so, well, I'm sorry. Yeah, it actually rendered the whole scene because before it was white. But, this is now just selecting that little portion of it here. I guess just to show you this feature here that I'm talking about. What happens here if you do this, and then let's say I'm going to bring up the visibility again of that section here. And you see, as I do that, this little thing changes here, and I can just see, like, without having to render the whole thing again, I can just see like what's affected here, and that's that little area here. Now my render is a little simple, so it's not really taking that long to do it here, but you might have renders that are much more involved, and so things are going to take a little longer to see. So for that reason, you might want to select a little part of the image here to just test things out. I like this sort of. I think this is going to work for what I'm trying to do here. And at this point here, I've already done my my render setup. Everything is in the right place. I've got the frames here. One last thing I want to check here: renderable camera here. So I don't want to render the perspective, right? Because perspective would give me this, and that's not what I want. So in here, I'm going to choose camera 1, right? And just jump in here to camera 1 as well. And we make sure everything here is ready, size and so on. At this point here, I'm actually going to switch the mode here. So instead of where it says modeling here, I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to take it to rendering, like so. And in here, I'm going to go to render, and here I'm going to choose render sequence here. I am going to click this little box here so we can see some settings. Before I hit that button, I'm going to click this, and here, sure enough, this does say the current camera is camera 1, so I'm going to make sure that's set up here, and I'm ready to go. There's an alternate file location that I could put it in here, but I've got this set to the project, so I'm going to just go with this. And let's just render the sequence and close. So at this point here, it's starting to make my pictures here. And, what's going on here? Oh, okay, of course, because I forgot. We started looking at nothing, so that's intentional, So we're looking at a blank screen as it zooms through the teeth here, and it's just going to make picture by picture. And if we look at the folder that that we set here, here we are, burger animation. Let's go into images here. I did a previous animation, burger anim 1. I think I called this something else, burger logo anim here. And you can see as it's doing this thing here, it's writing these new images here. So I've got 5 frames of animation here, and I can see that in the script editor here. And that there's my 6th, and it's writing my images. And you can see this isn't a terribly complex animation, but it's going to take me some time to do. So what I would recommend that you do is before you actually render this out, give it a couple little renders in different spots just to check that the lighting and all that stuff is indeed like how you want it, and then just let the computer do its thing. I would just check on it every now and then. Again, this particular animation isn't going to take me long, but my point here is like, I don't really have much control over the process at this point. The computer is just doing what I told it to do, and I'm going to pause the video, let it finish its job, and come back to this in a second. Alright, so it looks like my rendering is done, and I can double check here. It says sequence rendering completed, and just like I said, because we set the project here, you can see, if I open up the script editor here, you can see the place that it's set, that it saved the images here. So that's under this place here. So I'm going to just take this here really quick. Control C, and let's open up File Explorer. And I'm just going to point it to that folder there. And there we are. So these are all my images here. You can see, that's where it saved all that stuff up until frame 80 like it told it to. Okay, I'm going to take these frames and I'm going to bring them into my editing program. Now you can do this in Premiere. I'm doing After Effects because there's some more things that I can do in After Effects, and it's just kind of handy. It's a very useful program. But in here, let's go in here to After Effects. So I've started that up here, and I do want to point out here, the way Maya works is it makes frames of animation, like little individual pictures here, and I'm going to have to find a way to put this together, such as After Effects or something like that, into a movie. So I may have gone over this in a different video here, But this is After Effects here, and this is your project window, right? The project window is where you're going to see everything that you're going to use for this this video that I'm making. You know, be it like different scenes, you know, different image sequences, right? For different shots. Maybe I can have, I can have sound, I can have different things, maybe like a logo or something that I got from Illustrator, whatever it may be. You're going to see it in this project window here, which acts kind of like your maybe like a, let's say, an inventory for the things that you're going to use in your project here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring my image sequence in, and if you remember here, I was just telling you guys about image sequences and how Photoshop, I'm sorry, not Photoshop, how After Effects enables all those little things so that you can all those little images, and it puts it all together for you so you don't have to pull them up one by one. I've seen some beginner students like occasionally just painfully just try to bring in image by image, and that's just impossible here. It just takes such a long time. So this is what I was telling you here. So I'm actually going to bring in this image too here, just for example here. So I'm going to find the very first one here. This is something I did before. This is Burger Anim 00 something. And here it recognizes, oh, you have several image sequences with this name. So if I check this little box here, right, open EXR sequence, then I can just import that in, and then it offers me this option here to create a composition. Sure, I'll keep this on for now, I think. Yeah, I'll keep that on for now because I like that option because it's something I'm going to want to do anyways. But I'm going to explain the composition in just a second. So I'm going to import this in. This is the very first sequence, and this isn't even the one I rendered. This is something I did previously. So do this, and you see here, instead of bringing in 100 different little images, it's brought me this little image sequence, and it's created a composition from it here. So you see this? This is a composition, and a composition is kind of like a little sort of a self-contained animation, and I can put other animations in it, or I can, I can reuse this part here to maybe, I don't know, maybe make like a cut or something like that, or a different shot. Anyway, that's my animation here, and if I just scrub through this here, I can see the previous animation I did, and that's my little burger flying into the scene here. Which is cool because maybe I can do a different shot. I can show you guys how to do a cut here. Anyway, let's keep that handy here. Let's talk about like, well, what if I wanted to make a composition here? So if I can go here to composition, let's go to new composition, and I'm going to make a blank thing. Let's call this final edit, right? Edited film, right? Here I have a size here that I can choose, 960 by 540 or whatever you may happen to be working with here. You can adjust the size here. I would probably normally be working a little bigger here. Frame rate, well, okay, so here's the thing. That frame rate that I was working with, that was at 30 frames per second. So I'm going to need to adjust this here to 30 because this is the standard for video. I'm going to adjust this to 30 frames per second. So this is my final edited film. A little trick I learned like a while back. You guys don't have to worry about this too much anymore, but because now you guys have a way of putting this stuff into folders, and I can organize my things like this, for example. So before we had that here, a quick trick to sort of get this to stack up on top here would be to rename the this thing with like a symbol of some sort, or something like that, and that would line this up at the very top here. Maybe numbers would work too. Anyway, so I've got the final edited film, and let's bring it in. I'm going to bring in another file, so I'm going to right-click here, and let's bring in the last image sequence that I created from Maya. So I'm going to scroll down here, and I believe it's called something logo. Here we are, Burger Logo Animation 00. That's the very first frame. I've got this little guy checked on. Open EXR sequence. I could yeah, I'm going to create a composition for this here. So I'm going to press import. And here we have the next thing here. and you can see I'm now in the burger logo animation sequence. I like this one more, you see? And if I scrub through it, you're going to get this little sort of pixely sort of preview of it, but you can see the frames here, and it looks like that. And this thing goes for about 20 seconds, which is the duration of my my thing. And now, if you wanted to extend that here, what I could do is I could go to composition settings, and then here, for example, here this goes to about 2 minutes and 21 seconds. The frame rate here, it picked that up from the file that I generated here, so 30 frames per second. I could choose, you know what, I could go bigger here. So I can, instead of 2, I can make this 4 and can press OK. Down here, for example, if I have this this little thing down here, I can zoom in or out, and you can see the entirety of the timeline here. So that goes to about 20 frames, which is no, I'm sorry, it goes for more than 20 frames. So I've got about a second right here, and then another second here, and then that's all the footage I have. And from here, I could maybe I could maybe just take this and extend it here, or whatever. If we wanted to, just for example, just to give you guys an example here, let's go back into here. I'm going to go to import. This time, let's take the very last frame of it here, just so it holds still. Yeah, just a trick here that we can do. So here, if I did this here, I have that last frame. Oh shoot, I'm sorry. So undo that here. I'm going to go here to import. I forgot one little thing. So let's get that last little frame. And this time, I'm going to check this off, and I'll press import. And you know what? I don't need a composition for this either. I'm just going to do this. And so in here, let's say that last little frame here, I'm just going to bring this in to here, and I'm going to drag that in here. I mean, alternatively, I could just drag it in here, and you see that sort of overlays my frame onto that. And you can see it's got a transparent background, and it just fits perfect. Well, I mean, it would fit perfectly if I just dropped it in here. The easiest way to do that is just to take this and drop it in here, and then now all of a sudden I can do some editing here. So if I scrub through this here, you're going to see I have 2 frames. One frame is sort of holding still, and this thing finally comes into this position here. I'm going to just zoom in here, and let's make that cut. I'm going to take this little bottom layer, for example, and I'm going to scrub this all the way over here to where it meets that timeline, and you see they're both touching here. If I just zoom in here, you can see it just transitions from one to the other, and now it holds still for as long as I want here. So I could have a whole other second, or however much I want. I can that's just one single frame. I could make that as big as I want, and just hold still from there. So that's my burger logo animation, and let's take the final edited film. So for example here, what I could even do is I can take 2 different camera angles. Let's say I did 2 different shots like this. Let's take scene 1. Let's take this thing just for fun. I'm going to make this be like my first part. Let's see what I get out of this here. So let's do this, and let's cut this to be right about here, just for fun. And what else? I'm going to take this and let's put that under here, and let's move that here. So I don't know. We're getting 2 sort of things in here. Maybe we can do a little fade out here. So I'm going to push this back a little bit here. Let's zoom in here. And under here, if I wanted to do a fade out here, for example, let's open up the top layer, and I'm going to open up the top layer. By that I mean the top composition. This is still a composition, and if I double click on this, that takes me inside this film where I have access to the films. And and if you wanted to put whatever like subtitles or something here, I could go and make another layer here, for example. And let's, so here, I have some subtitles or whatever it may be that you want to do here. I could just treat that as an animation, and you can open this and animate that too. Like I'm going to show you guys that in just a second here. So if I if I have that here, for example, let's just jump back in to the final edited film, and this is going to give me a chance to show you guys here. So back at this composition, remember I have two compositions. So I have my original burger anim here that's got this little thing that I was just fooling around with here. And then I'm going to cut to my latest animation here where we just rendered this out of Maya. And that just shows you here, like, you know, anything I do in one composition, if it's in another composition, you're going to see it, you know, so I can have things contained in things. You know, just to sort of further show that point here, let's go back in here. Let's just do a quick little animation with this here. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to open this up, and you have this little thing here that says transform. I'm going to open this transform up. Every object here that you put in After Effects is going to have the transform. So that includes things like positions, rotations, and opacities and stuff like that. Let's do this. I'm going to start here. I'm going to just move it forward a little bit here, and I'm going to press the little stopwatch here for position, and you see you get a little diamond here. If I move that back here, what I'm going to do is just move that up here like so, and that just drops down like that, you see, which is cool. And then maybe I just want it to disappear a little bit here. So maybe in here I'm going to have this is set to 100% opacity, meaning it's 100% visible. If I click this, maybe scoot it forward a couple frames here, I'm going to just turn it down here. So this is what I get here. It comes into view, and I zoom it out here at this point here. So finally, let's go back to the edited video. It comes into view, and at this point it's going to zoom out. That was a pretty lucky guess here. And then, well, I guess I can extend this a little more to make it a little bit more interesting. And then this comes over here and it disappears. You know, at this point, maybe I can scoot this. I like that. Let's just scoot this forward a couple frames here. Oh, I forgot, I'm doing the fade out here. So let's do this. I'm going to take this here, and let's do a fade out here with the, this first layer here. I'm going to open this up here, and let's go here to transform. I'm going to click opacity, so I'm at 100% here. And again, I have the top layer selected, so I'm at 100% visibility, and a couple frames forward, I'm going to just make this invisible here. So I'm going to just zoom all that out here to 0%, and here's the effect I get. So it zooms out, and I get this new thing here coming out like that. Let's zoom back out here. And I think there's some more animation that's missing here. I can't see this here, so I'm going to need to make my composition bigger. So I'm going to go to composition, composition settings. Let's give this like, I don't know, 6 seconds of animation, right? Oops. Control Z. Here, 6 seconds of animation, and I will press OK. And now I can zoom out here under this little icon, and you can see my film. Oh, okay, so yeah, at this point here, this is that one little still frame that we added just to hold it in place here. So I'm actually going to just take it a couple frames forward here, and I don't need it to be this long. I just need it to be a couple more frames long. So let's have it hold still till about here. I'm going to trim the composition. Now I could just see the time here, and it says 3:14. So I could, of course, just go into composition settings and enter that in here, right? Or what I could do is I could take this little blue bar up here, pull the, well, it's not blue, but you know what I mean. In here, I can take this tip here that's sort of blue, and just bring it back here so it fits like right on that slider there, on the little time code thing there, the time cursor thing there. And yeah, this is how long I want my film to last, and this is what you call the work area, right? So if we go over here to composition here, we have this little command here that says trim comp to work area. So if I do this, that's all I have to worry about. I don't have to fiddle around with any numbers or anything. I can just press this, and you can see the command. I don't actually have to even come up here. If I learn that command, Control-Shift+X, then I can just crop this out to this size, and we have ourselves a little finished animation here, you know, that you can you can play around with here. And so now the last step here is for me to fire up the media encoder. And what I'm saying here is like my computer is a little slow, so I'm actually going to probably pause this video to fire this up here. But what I'm going to do is I need to make a film out of this. And what that means is, like, right now this is an After Effects project. I can't do anything with that because you know, the person I'm sending it to might not have After Effects, much less the files that I use to make this project. So what I want to do is I want to compress this all into like a finished film, say in an MP4 format or perhaps like a QuickTime format or something like that. And I'm going to use another program that's kind of attached to After Effects and to the other Adobe programs called Media Encoder here. So this usually comes with the Creative Cloud, and if you don't have it, you know, if you don't have any of this stuff, you can come over here to the Creative Cloud, and if you've got a plan here, you can you can download the things you need. For this demo that I've been doing here, you're going to need After Effects and you're going to need Media Encoder. And you can just go ahead and download the things you need and it'll install it on your computer if you have the Creative Cloud set up. So, so yeah, with this set up here, let me just go and send it to the Media Encoder. And so it's going to do this, and when I press this here, you can see the shortcut here, it sends it off to Media Encoder, and it's going to fire up, and on my computer,